Tired of the emptiness that luxury couldn't fill, an eccentric millionaire decides to temporarily abandon his fortune to live as a beggar on the streets of a big city. In search of purpose, he encounters the harsh reality of the marginalized, but it's when he crosses paths with a resilient boy trapped in a web of exploitation and dark secrets that his journey gains new meaning. Amid the struggle for justice and redemption, he discovers that the true power of his wealth lies not in what it can buy, but in what it can transform. William Parker observed his reflection in the full-length mirror that occupied the entire wall of his closet. His brown eyes, once bright with ambition, now reflected an emptiness that even his fortune, estimated in billions, couldn't fill. At 45, owner of the largest technology conglomerate in the United States, he had everything money could buy, except what he needed most: a purpose. "Mr. Parker, your meeting with the board starts in 15 minutes, the voice of Sarah, his assistant, for over a decade sounded through the intercom. "Cancel it," he replied dryly, still staring at his own image. "Cancel all my meetings for the next few days." A brief silence followed before Sarah's hesitant response. "But sir, the merger with the European company, it can wait," William interrupted. "Jack can lead the negotiations. I need to resolve something personal." William turned off the intercom before Sarah could protest. He walked to his mahogany desk, an inheritance from his father, and opened the bottom drawer. From there he retrieved an old notebook, its pages yellowed by time. It was his mother's diary, found only recently during a cleaning of the mansion's attic. In recent weeks, her words had been haunting him. "My son grows up surrounded by privileges, but I fear he will never know the true value of life. William has everything, except the ability to see beyond the walls of our mansion." Those words, written more than 3 decades ago, were still true. His mother, who dedicated her life to social causes, always tried to instill in him the importance of looking beyond his own interests. But William, absorbed by the ambition to expand the family business, never listened. Now at 45, divorced and childless, he felt the weight of that truth. His business achievements seemed empty. The headlines that exalted him as the technology genius or America's youngest billionaire no longer filled him with pride. William stood up and walked to the window of his penthouse. Below, New York pulsed in its frantic rhythm. Among the skyscrapers and luxury cars, he could see the homeless people, invisible to most of the hurried passers-by. What would it be like to live on the other side? He murmured to himself. The idea he had been cultivating for the past few weeks finally crystallized in his mind. He returned to the closet and, ignoring the perfectly aligned Italian suits, headed to a less noble area of the space. There he began to separate some basic pieces: faded jeans, simple t-shirts, a worn-out jacket he used for gardening work. His cell phone rang several times, but he ignored it. He knew it was probably Jack, his vice president, desperate about his sudden decision to step away. Or maybe it was his brother Michael, worried about another of his eccentric behaviors, as he used to call them. But William was determined. He needed to understand the other side of life, the one his mother had tried so hard to show him. It wouldn't just be a social experiment or a temporary empathy exercise. It would be a search for redemption, an attempt to find the purpose that his wealth had never provided. At his desk, he wrote 2 letters. The first, for Sarah, contained detailed instructions on how to proceed in his absence. The second, for Jack, temporarily delegated the necessary powers to conduct business. He didn't mention his real plans in either of them. He looked at himself one last time in the mirror. The William Parker that everyone knew needed to disappear for a while. He grabbed an old backpack, filled it with some simple changes of clothes and essential documents. In a separate wallet, he put only a few small bills, enough for emergencies but not so much as to draw attention. "It's time," he said to his reflection, adjusting the worn-out jacket. "Time to get to know the world that Mom so wanted me to see." Before leaving, he took his mother's diary and tore out a particular page, carefully folding it and tucking it into his pocket. Those words would serve as his moral compass during the journey he was about to begin. He left his apartment by the service stairs, avoiding the building staff who might recognize him. As he reached the street, He blended into the crowd of pedestrians. For the first time in his life, no one noticed him. No one recognized him. He was just another anonymous face in the crowd. And so, William Parker, the billionaire, began his journey to become invisible, not knowing that this decision would not only change his life, but also that of many others who would cross his path. The first night on the streets of New York was a reality shock for William. The comfort of his penthouse seemed like a distant dream as he settled on rough cardboard under the awning of a closed store in the downtown area. The noise of cars and the cold wind that cut between the buildings were his only companions. "Hey friend, this place is already taken." A hoarse voice surprised him. A man of about 60, carrying some plastic bags, stared at him with a mixture of irritation and weariness. William got up quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. Newbie, huh?" The man softened his expression. "I'm Frank, but you can call me Frankie. There's another space up front, near the gas station. It's safer even." That was his first lesson. The streets had their own rules, their own codes of conduct. Territory, respect, and survival went hand in hand. William followed Frankie's suggestion, carrying his improvised cardboard to the indicated location. The next morning, his body ached in places he didn't even know existed. The smell of coffee coming from a nearby bakery made his stomach growl, reminding him that he would need to find ways to feed himself. His cash reserves wouldn't last long if he wanted to keep his disguise convincing. It was then that he had his first glimpse of the boy. Among the cars stopped at the traffic light, a small and agile figure snaked, offering candies and chocolates. He couldn't be more than 10 years old, but his eyes carried a disconcerting maturity. "That's Ethan," commented a lady selling water on the sidewalk. "That boy has a good heart. The other day he shared his bread with me, even though he had sold little that day." William observed the boy more closely. His clothes were dirty and worn, but there was something in his posture that set him apart. While other children in similar situations showed fear or submission, Ethan kept his head high, as if challenging the world to try to bring him down. Throughout the day, William tried to approach discreetly, buying some candies. The boy was efficient in his sales, but maintained a cautious distance from everyone. His dark eyes seemed to assess each person, as if looking for invisible threats. "Be careful with all that interest," Frankie's voice came from behind him, startling William. "The kid may seem alone, but there are people watching him, dangerous people." "What do you mean?" William asked, feeling a tightness in his chest. "There are things on the streets that it's better not to know, friend," Frankie replied enigmatically, "especially when you're a newbie like you." As the afternoon progressed, William noticed a pattern. Periodically, a burly man with a scar on his neck passed through the area, and Ethan's behavior visibly changed. The boy became more tense, his hands trembling slightly as he counted the money from his sales. During one of these occasions, William witnessed something that made his blood boil. The man with the scar approached Ethan, demanding the money collected. The boy reluctantly handed over some bills, but clearly kept something in his pocket. The man noticed and grabbed his arm forcefully. William took a step forward, ready to intervene, but Frankie held him back. "Don't get involved. Not yet. You don't know who you're dealing with." Helpless, William watched the man leave with Ethan's money. The boy, after the incident, didn't shed a single tear. Instead, he took out a bill from his back pocket that he had managed to hide and bought a bread at the bakery. To William's surprise, he split the bread in half and gave a part to the lady selling water. That night, lying again on the hard cardboard, William couldn't get Ethan out of his thoughts. In less than 48 hours on the streets, his certainties had been completely shaken. It wasn't just about understanding poverty or seeking personal redemption. There was something bigger happening, a web of relationships and power that kept people, including children, trapped in a cycle of exploitation. Rummaging through his backpack, he found the page from his mother's diary that he had brought with him. In the dim light of a street lamp, he reread her words. "The true value of a person lies not in what they possess, but in what they are willing to do for others." William fell asleep with these words echoing in his mind, while a plan began to form. He couldn't simply be an observer. He needed to act. But first, he needed to better understand the rules of this new world, and most importantly, he needed to gain Ethan's trust. The days on the streets had begun to transform William. His skin, once protected in air-conditioned offices, was now marked by the sun. The clothes, which he had purposely chosen to be simple, carried the genuine stains and wear of life on the sidewalks. But it was his eyes that had changed most significantly. The emptiness had given way to a purpose. Every morning, he watched Ethan arrive with his candy box. The boy had a precise routine. First, he bought a small coffee at the bakery, then meticulously organized his merchandise. William noticed that he always kept some special chocolates in a separate pocket of his worn-out backpack. "The kid has a sister," Frankie revealed during one of their conversations. "She's in a shelter on the other side of the city. He saves the best sweets for her, visits on weekends when they let him." This information hit William like a punch. The boy's determination gained a new dimension. He wasn't just fighting for himself. On a particularly hot afternoon, William saw his opportunity to approach. Ethan, exhausted, sat on the sidewalk, his hands trembling as he counted some coins. Without thinking twice, William bought a bottle of cold water and approached. "Would you like some water?" he offered, maintaining a respectful distance. Ethan looked suspicious, but thirst spoke louder. He accepted the bottle, taking small, calculated sips. "Thank you," he murmured, returning the bottle still half full. "You can keep it," William smiled. "It's very hot today." A silence settled between them, not entirely uncomfortable. William noticed a small scar on the boy's hand, an old mark that seemed to tell stories. "You're new around here," Ethan suddenly commented, surprising William. "I saw when you arrived. You don't really know how things work." "Is it that obvious?" William laughed softly. "Your hands," the boy pointed out. "They're still too soft. Everyone here has calluses." The boy's perspicacity impressed William. He would need to be more careful with his disguise. "I'm William," he offered, opting to keep his real name. Too many lies could complicate things later. "Ethan," the boy replied, hesitating before adding, "You should be careful who you talk to around here. Not everyone is what they seem." There was a veiled warning in those words, a wisdom beyond his years. William nodded, respecting the advice. In the days that followed, they established a silent routine. William bought water or food to share, and Ethan gradually lowered his guard. The conversations, initially scarce, began to flow more naturally. "Do you have a family?" Ethan asked one day while they shared a pastry. "I had," William replied, thinking of his mother. "Now it's complicated." "Everything is complicated," the boy philosophized, his eyes lost in the movement of the street. It was during one of these conversations that William noticed something peculiar. Whenever he mentioned family or the past, Ethan subtly changed his posture. His shoulders would tense, and his eyes would scan the surroundings as if looking for something or someone. One morning, William arrived earlier than usual and witnessed a scene that disturbed him. Ethan was talking to an elegant woman in a black car. The boy seemed agitated, repeatedly shaking his head. When the woman reached out to touch him, he abruptly recoiled and ran away. "That woman," William commented to Frankie later. "Who is she?" "Shows up from time to time," Frankie replied, his face showing concern. "Says she's the kid's aunt, but there's something strange. Ethan acts different when she's around." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, but the complete picture was still hazy. William knew he needed to fully gain Ethan's trust before asking more direct questions. The opportunity arose unexpectedly. During a rainy afternoon, William noticed Ethan shivering from cold under an awning. Without hesitation, he took off his jacket and offered it to the boy. "Why do you care?" Ethan asked, his voice choked as he wrapped himself in the jacket too big for his size. "Because someone needs to care," William answered simply. That night, for the first time, Ethan allowed William to sit beside him while he organized the money from his sales. It was a small gesture but loaded with meaning. It was a first step of trust. What William didn't know was that that moment of closeness had been observed. Across the street, inside a dark car, the elegant woman was making notes on her cell phone, her face a mask of calculated determination. The trust that Ethan was beginning to place in William came with responsibility. The boy, little by little, was letting slip fragments of his story, like loose pieces of a puzzle that William was carefully trying to put together. "My sister Emma has her birthday tomorrow," Ethan commented while organizing his candies. 9 years old. I promised to bring her a special gift." William watched the boy carefully separate some coins, counting them several times. "What do you want to give her?" "There's a doll in Mr. Johnson's store," Ethan replied, his eyes shining. "She saw it last time we passed by there. It's been saved for a while now." Mr. Johnson's store was a simple thrift shop a few blocks away. William knew the place. In the last few weeks he had bought some used clothes there to keep his disguise convincing. "I can help you buy it," William offered. "No," Ethan responded quickly, his expression hardening. "I need to do it myself, I promised her. A promise is a promise." That strong reaction to an offer of help caught William's attention. There was something more there, some untold story about promises and responsibilities. That afternoon, while Ethan was selling his sweets, the elegant woman appeared again. This time, William was close enough to hear the conversation. "Ethan, you need to listen to me," she insisted, her voice controlled but firm. "I'm your Aunt Vanessa. Your mother was my sister. You and Emma have the right to her inheritance." "Liar," Ethan shot back, his eyes flashing. "My mum never talked about you, and Dad always said not to trust people who show up talking about money." Vanessa tried to grab the boy's arm, but he skillfully dodged. "Your father had no right to hide you from us. That money, that house, it was all your mother's." William, pretending to fiddle with his things, absorbed every word. The story was beginning to gain new layers. Later he found Frankie smoking a cigarette he'd found on the ground. The old man seemed thoughtful. "Frankie, what do you know about Ethan's family?" William asked, sitting down beside him. The old man took a long drag before answering. "Sad story. The boy's mother came from a rich family, but she fell in love with a street musician. Her family didn't accept it. The couple ran away, lived well for a while, until..." Frankie paused, looking around before continuing. "They say Ethan's father discovered something big, something wrong that his wife's family was doing. I don't know the details, but soon after that, the parents disappeared. Ethan and his sister were separated. He ran away from the shelter to try to protect Emma." "Protect her from what?" William questioned, his heart racing. "From the boss," a childish voice answered. It was Ethan standing behind them, his eyes watery. "He works for Aunt Vanessa. They pretend they want to help us, but they only want Mom's money." William felt his stomach churn. The boy continued as if a dam had broken. "Dad found out they were doing wrong things with the family company's money. Fake documents, lying contracts. He kept evidence, said that one day the truth would come out." "Where is this evidence, Ethan?" William asked softly. "I don't know," the boy lied, his eyes briefly darting to his worn-out backpack. "But I promised Dad I'd take care of Emma until he came back. I can't let them catch us." At that moment, William understood the true dimension of the situation. It wasn't just about an inheritance. It was about justice, about protecting two children from a web of lies and greed. The sound of heavy footsteps interrupted the conversation. The man with the scar was approaching, his gaze fixed on Ethan. William instinctively placed himself between them. "Time to settle accounts, kid," the man growled. "The boss is losing patience." Ethan clutched his backpack tightly, his knuckles white with tension. William realized that there, in that old backpack, were probably the proofs that could change everything. The sun was beginning to set over New York, painting the sky orange and red. On the streets, the shadows lengthened, as did the secrets they hid. William knew that the time had come to make a decision, to continue just observing or to act to protect Ethan and his sister. The answer was clear in his heart, even if the path ahead was uncertain and dangerous. The sky dawned heavy over New York, foreshadowing a storm. William had slept poorly, his mind filled with worries about Ethan and the revelations of the previous day. The weight of the documents that the boy carried in his backpack seemed to increase the danger with each minute. "He didn't come today," Frankie commented, approaching with a cup of coffee. "The kid always arrives before 7. Something's wrong." William felt his heart tighten. Ethan was never late. His punctuality was one of the boy's most striking characteristics. He got up quickly, ignoring the aches in his body, now accustomed to the hard ground. "I'm going to look for him," he decided, storing his few belongings. "Be careful," Frankie warned, his voice grave. "I saw Ms. Vanessa's car parked near Joe's Alley earlier. That place is never a good sign." Joe's Alley was known to be a meeting point for shady business. William knew the area. In his previous life, his drivers always avoided that place. Now, it was exactly where his feet were taking him. As he approached the location, he heard raised voices. He hid behind a dumpster, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hand over that backpack, kid." The voice of the man with the scar echoed off the alley walls. "Ms. Vanessa just wants to talk. It doesn't have to be the hard way." "No!" Ethan's voice sounded firm, despite the evident fear. "You hurt my parents. I won't let you hurt Emma, too." William peeked from the side of the dumpster. Ethan was cornered against a wall, hugging his backpack as if his life depended on it. The man with the scar and two other thugs surrounded him. A few meters behind, Vanessa watched the scene from inside her luxury car. "Your father was a meddler," Vanessa spoke, her elegant voice contrasting with the cruelty of her words. "He thought he could destroy years of our family's hard work with some paperwork. Now he's not here to protect you anymore." "Liar," Ethan shouted, tears running down his dirty face. "My dad will come back. He promised." That's when one of the men lunged forward, trying to snatch the backpack by force. Ethan resisted, but he was too small to fight against an adult. The backpack tore, scattering candies and papers on the ground. William didn't think twice. He came out of his hiding place and ran towards the group. "Let him go!" His voice thundered through the alley, surprising everyone with its natural authority, an echo of the executive he used to be. "Who are you to interfere?" The man with the scar turned, threatening. "Someone who knows you're making a mistake," William replied, positioning himself between Ethan and the aggressors. "Those documents you want so badly? They've already been digitized. They're safe in several places." It was a bluff, but William knew how to sound convincing. Years of business negotiations had prepared him for moments like this. Vanessa got out of the car, her face a mask of concern. "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying that if anything happens to Ethan or Emma, all the evidence of your company's frauds will go straight to the police and the press," William continued, keeping his voice steady. "Their father was smarter than you imagine." Ethan, still shaking, began to pick up the papers from the ground. William noticed that some had familiar logos. They were corporate documents that he recognized from his years in the business world. "You're lying," Vanessa hissed, but there was a tremor in her voice. "Want to risk it?" William challenged. "Want to see your family in the newspaper headlines? Everything your parents built destroyed because of your greed." A thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first raindrops began to fall. Vanessa looked at the scattered papers, at Ethan, and finally at William. Something in her eyes changed, fear perhaps. "Let's go," she ordered the men, her voice trembling slightly. "For now." When Vanessa's car disappeared around the corner, William felt his knees weaken. Ethan was still shaking, clinging to the wet papers. "How did you know?" the boy asked, looking at William with a mixture of gratitude and distrust. William knew that the moment of truth had arrived. His disguise was beginning to crumble, but now there was something more important at stake: the safety of Ethan and his sister. "We need to talk," he said softly, helping the boy collect the last documents. "But first, let's go get your sister. It's not safe for her to stay at the shelter anymore." The rain was falling heavily as William and Ethan took shelter in a small, discreet diner. The boy held a hot chocolate between his trembling hands, his eyes fixed on William with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The wet documents, carefully stored in a plastic bag, rested between them on the table. "You're not really homeless, are you?" Ethan finally asked, his voice low but firm. William took a deep breath. The moment he had feared so much had arrived. "No, I'm not. Actually, I'm a businessman. I came to the streets by choice, seeking to better understand people's lives and find a greater purpose for my fortune." He expected to see anger in the boy's eyes, but found only wisdom beyond his years. "I knew it," Ethan said simply. "Your hands, your way of speaking. You're different from the others." "Why didn't you say anything?" William asked, surprised. Because you were the only one who really cared, Ethan replied, a slight smile appearing on his lips. Not for the money, not for the inheritance, but for me and Emma. The waiter approached to refill their drinks, and they waited in silence until he walked away. Now I need to tell you the whole truth, William began. My full name is William Parker. I own the largest technology conglomerate in the United States. Ethan's eyes widened in recognition. I've seen you in the newspaper. Dad used to say you were different from other businessmen. Your father knew me, William questioned, intrigued. He worked investigating corporate fraud, Ethan revealed, lowering his voice even more. He said you were one of the few honest ones in the field. That's why he kept all the evidence about Aunt Vanessa and Mom's family company. William picked up the wet documents and began to examine them more carefully. They were records of suspicious transactions, contracts with illegal clauses, compromising emails, a meticulous investigation work. Ethan, this is much bigger than we imagined, William murmured, flipping through the pages. Your Aunt Vanessa isn't alone in this. There are powerful people involved. That's why Dad said we needed to protect the documents, Ethan explained. He kept copies in several places. Before he disappeared, he gave me this part and said that one day I would know who to give it to. The boy's words hit William like lightning. You think your father left this evidence with you? To find me? Ethan shrugged, but his eyes sparkled with hope. He always said that fate has a funny way of bringing the right people together. A thunder echoed in the distance, making the diner's lights flicker. William looked out the window, watching the rain that showed no signs of letting. We need to act fast, he decided. Vanessa won't give up easily. First, let's go get your sister. Then I'll use my contacts to ensure this evidence reaches the right authorities. What if they try to hurt us? Ethan asked, his voice betraying a rarely shown fear. I won't let them, William promised, his voice filled with determination. I have resources, Ethan. I can protect you and Emma, but I need you to trust me completely. No more secrets between us. The boy was silent for a long moment, studying William's face. Finally, he took something out of his pants pocket, an old key. Dad left this too, he revealed. He said it was for the most important part of the evidence, a safe somewhere, I never knew where. William took the key, examining it carefully. His heart raced as he recognized the peculiar shape. I know where this safe is, he said, his mind racing with the implications. It's in the old bank downtown, which closed years ago. Your father must have rented a safe there before it closed. How are we going to get in there? Ethan asked, his eyes shining with renewed hope. Let's just say, William smiled, being the owner of one of the largest companies in the country opens some doors. But first, let's go get your sister. Family is more important than any document. Ethan smiled, a true childlike smile that reminded William that, despite all his forced maturity, he was still just a child. William, the boy called, hesitant, thank you for not being like the other adults who promised to help. And thank you, Ethan, William replied, feeling his eyes water, for helping me find the purpose I was looking for so much. Together, they watched the rain slowly subside, knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey. There was still much to be done, but now they had something that neither Vanessa nor her henchmen could buy: mutual trust and the certainty that they were no longer alone. The shelter where Emma lived was an old building in the east side of New York. William, now dressed in clean and well-pressed clothes, adjusted his tie as he observed the place from the car he had retrieved from his penthouse. Are you sure she's here? He asked Ethan, who could barely contain himself in the passenger seat. I'm sure, the boy replied, his eyes fixed on the entrance gate. But on Sundays she stays in the backyard. There's a big tree there. She always reads under it. William nodded, impressed once again with the detailed knowledge Ethan had of his sister's routine. How are we going to do this legally? The shelter director, Mrs. Thompson. She's a good person, Ethan explained. She knows. Something is wrong. She's already tried to convince me to stay there too, to protect me, but I needed to stay on the street to take care of the documents. With a plan in mind, William and Ethan got out of the car. The businessman had made some important calls during the morning, using his influence to ensure that everything happened within the law. At the shelter's reception, Mrs. Thompson greeted them with a worried expression. Her eyes widened as she recognized William Parker, but it was the gentle smile directed at Ethan that showed he was right about her. "You finally brought real help," she said to the boy before turning to William. "That woman, Vanessa, has been showing up here a lot. Something about her never seemed right to me." William handed her a folder with documents. "Mrs. Thompson, I have here a court order for temporary custody of the children. There's also evidence that their aunt is involved in illegal activities that could put Emma and Ethan at risk." Mrs. Thompson carefully examined the papers, her hands slightly trembling. "This explains a lot. Emma always gets nervous when that woman shows up. I'll go get her." As they waited, Ethan fidgeted restlessly with the backpack that now carried only a few candies. The important documents were safe in William's private safe. "What if she doesn't want to come?" he asked, his voice betraying his insecurity. "She'll want to," William assured him. "You're her hero, Ethan. You always have been." The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the conversation. A 9-year-old girl, with the same expressive eyes as Ethan, came running into the room. "Ethan!" Emma shouted, throwing herself into her brother's arms. William watched emotionally as the siblings reunited. Emma wore a simple but clean dress, and her hair was carefully braided. Despite the separation, it was evident that Mrs. Thompson had taken good care of her. "I brought a present for you," Ethan said, taking out of his backpack a package wrapped in newspaper. Emma carefully opened the gift, her eyes shining as she saw the doll she wanted so much. "You remembered," she exclaimed, hugging the toy. "A promise is a promise," Ethan replied, smiling. William approached gently. "Hi, Emma. I'm William. Your brother and I have become great friends." The girl studied him with the same intensity that characterized Ethan's gaze. "Are you going to help us find our parents?" "I'll do everything in my power," William promised. After settling the details with Mrs. Thompson, who insisted on keeping in touch to follow the children's well-being, they headed to the old bank in downtown New York. The Art Deco building, although closed to the public, still maintained its imposing presence. William had obtained special authorization to access the safe area thanks to his contacts in the financial sector. "Wait in the car with Emma," he instructed his trusted driver Andrew, who he had picked up earlier. Inside the bank, dust danced in the beams of light entering through the high windows. The retired manager accompanying them guided them through silent corridors to the safe. "Room number 2847, William murmured, locating the safe indicated on the key. With slightly trembling hands, Ethan inserted the key. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing its contents: a thick folder, a USB drive, and a sealed envelope with the children's names. "Dad always said that truth was the best protection," Ethan commented, his voice choked. Before they could examine the contents, William's cell phone vibrated. It was Andrew. "Sir," the driver's voice was tense, "there are 2 black cars parked on the corner. Vanessa is in one of them." William quickly stored the items in his briefcase. "We need to go, they must have followed us." "There's an exit through the back," the manager informed. "It leads to another street." As they hurried through the bank's corridors, William realized that this race wasn't just for physical safety. It was a race for truth, for justice, and most importantly, for the future of 2 children who had already lost too much of their childhoods. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, reminding them that there was no time to lose. Vanessa was close, but now they had something she didn't have: the complete evidence of her crimes, and more importantly, they had each other. In the safety of William's penthouse, Emma slept on the couch, hugging her new doll, while Ethan remained alert, sitting at the dining room table. William carefully spread out the contents found in the safe: documents, photos, and the USB drive that could contain the answers they were looking for. "Do you want to open the envelope first?" William gently asked, pointing to the sealed envelope with the children's names. Ethan nodded, his small hands trembling slightly as he broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The boy began to read in a low voice. "My dear Ethan and Emma, if you're reading this, it means you've found someone you can trust, someone who understands that truth and justice are more important than money and power. What we discovered about your mother's family company goes far beyond simple fraud. Vanessa and her associates created a complex scheme to divert resources from social projects, pretending to help people in need while enriching themselves at the expense of others suffering. Your mother tried to change things from the inside, but when she realized the extent of the corruption, we decided to act. We gathered evidence, documented everything, but they found out. That's why we had to separate, to protect you and ensure that the truth would come out at the right time. Don't think we abandoned you. Every day apart is agony, but we know this sacrifice is necessary. Trust who fate has put in your path, and always remember, true love finds its way back. Ethan wiped the tears streaming down his face, while William placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Your father was braver than we imagined, William commented, beginning to examine the other documents. Look at this. Records of fund diversions from dozens of social projects, all disguised as legitimate investments. That's why he always said we needed to help those who really needed it, Ethan murmured, remembering his father's lessons. William connected the USB drive to his laptop. The files revealed a complex web of corruption, emails, spreadsheets, and recordings that implicated not only Vanessa, but various influential business people and politicians. Your father was very smart, William observed, analyzing the data. He not only gathered evidence, but created backup copies and hid them in different places. This explains why Vanessa is so desperate to find everything. A movement on the couch caught his attention. Emma had woken up and was approaching silently, still hugging her doll. Dad knew we would make it, she said softly, sitting next to her brother. He always said that good people find each other. William felt his heart tighten. In just a few days, these two children had completely changed his life, given new meaning to his existence and his wealth. Are you hungry? He asked, realizing it was past dinner time. Yes, Emma answered excitedly. Can we make brownies later? So of course you can, William smiled, getting up to call his housekeeper, Mrs. Davis, who was already aware of the situation and had prepared the guest room for the children. While waiting for the food, William began to formulate a plan. With his connections and resources, he could ensure that the evidence reached the right authorities. More than that, he could use his influence to protect the children and perhaps help find their parents. William, Ethan called, his voice more confident than in recent days. Do you think they're okay, our parents? Your father planned all of this very carefully, William answered honestly. If he managed to hide all this evidence so well, I'm sure he also knew how to protect himself and your mother. The sound of the intercom interrupted the conversation. It was Mrs. Davis with dinner. As she set the table, William observed how the children seemed to gradually relax, as if they finally felt they were safe. During dinner, Emma told stories from the shelter, and Ethan talked about his adventures selling candy. William realized that despite everything they had been through, they still maintained the innocence and hope characteristic of childhood. Tomorrow, William announced as they served dessert, we'll start putting our plan into action. I have some trustworthy friends in the FBI and the Department of Justice. We're going to do this right within the law. And then? Emma asked, licking brownie off her fingers. Then, William smiled, you can stay here with me for as long as you need. I have plenty of space, and to be honest, I needed a little more life in this apartment. Ethan studied him for a moment before asking, why are you doing all this for us? William thought of the page from his mother's diary, still tucked in his pocket. Because sometimes we need to get lost to find what really matters. You helped me find a purpose, showed me that I can use my resources to make a difference. That night, while the children slept in the guest room, William returned to the documents. Each page revealed more details of the criminal scheme, more reasons to fight for justice. But beyond the physical evidence, there was something more important, the certainty that his life had changed forever, thanks to two children who taught him the true value of family. The morning began bustling in William's penthouse. Two FBI agents were examining the documents in the living room, while District Attorney Ms. Rebecca Anderson took notes on her tablet. The children watched everything from the kitchen, where Mrs. Davis tried to distract them with an elaborate breakfast. This is much more serious than we imagined, Ms. Anderson commented, adjusting her glasses. The scheme to divert funds from social projects is just the tip of the iceberg. Vanessa and her associates created a complete network of shell companies. And there's more, Agent Thompson added, holding up a folder. We found connections to other cases we've been investigating. The children's father did an impressive job gathering all this evidence. William observed Ethan and Emma through the kitchen door. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the children seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The intercom rang, startling everyone. It was the building's doorman. Mr. Parker, Miss Vanessa is here downstairs. She says she needs to speak with you urgently about family matters. The agents exchanged significant looks with the district attorney. It was the opportunity they had been waiting for. Let her up, William authorized, following the previously established plan. Ethan immediately tensed. She's not going to take us, is she? No, William assured, hugging the boy. Trust me, everything is under control. The agents and the district attorney positioned themselves in the adjacent office, ready to act. William asked Mrs. Davis to take the children to the bedroom, but Ethan insisted on staying. I need to see, he argued. I need to face my fear of her. The elevator announced Vanessa's arrival. When the doors opened, she entered as if she owned the place, but her usually controlled face betrayed signs of worry. William Parker, she said, trying to maintain her composure. We finally meet formally. I've come to get my niece and nephew. They're not your property, Vanessa, William responded calmly. And you know very well why they're under my protection. Don't be naive, she hissed, her mask of elegance beginning to crack. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections that can destroy even someone of your level. You mean the same connections you used to divert money from social projects? William asked, keeping his voice controlled. Or are you talking about the politicians who helped cover up your frauds? Vanessa's face paled. How did you... The documents you've been searching for so desperately. Ethan intervened, his voice surprisingly firm. They're all safe now. Dad knew what he was doing. Vanessa took a step towards her nephew, but William placed himself between them. Don't you dare, he warned. You don't understand, Vanessa argued, her voice now trembling. I built all of this. I transformed a small family business into an empire. Everything I did was to preserve the family legacy. No, Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, still holding her doll. You destroyed our family. Mom always said that dirty money doesn't bring happiness. It was at this moment that the district attorney and the agents emerged from the office. Vanessa, realizing the trap, tried to run to the elevator but was quickly restrained. Vanessa Roberts, Ms. Anderson announced formally, you're under arrest on suspicion of fraud, misappropriation of public funds, criminal conspiracy. As the agents led Vanessa out, she cast a final glance at the children. For a moment, something like regret crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by the cold mask of always. After everyone left, William hugged the children. It's over, he whispered. You're safe now. It's not over yet, Ethan corrected, his eyes shining with hope. We still need to find our parents. And we will, William promised. The FBI is already investigating some leads. With Vanessa detained, a lot of people are going to start talking. That night, for the first time since they arrived at the penthouse, the children slept peacefully. William stayed awake, reviewing the events of the past few days. His life had completely changed since he decided to disguise himself as a homeless person. He found not only a purpose, but also a family. His cell phone vibrated with a message from Ms. Anderson. We found something. Come to my office first thing tomorrow. Bring the children. William smiled, feeling they were getting closer and closer to a happy ending. But first, he would need to prepare Ethan and Emma for what could be the most important moment of their lives.